Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to this meeting of the TRIAD. As you know, my name is Sheriff Jerry McDermott, and I was appointed by Governor Charles Baker to step in after former Sheriff Michael Bellotti, who many of you are familiar with. Michael Bellotti went on to be the president of Quincy College, and he has now moved on to, he's heading up as president of a nonprofit that helps people with alcohol and drug dependence issues as well as mental health issues. It's great to be here with you and so many friends here today. Hello, Sergeant, welcome. And of course, you all know Joe Canavan from my office. Joe has been doing exemplary work with the former Sheriff Bellotti and now with myself. And just a quick hit on some of the programs that I think is important for you here in the audience to know about, but also to family and friends that may be watching this on cable later. One program that we do at the Norfolk County Sheriff's Office in conjunction with Fallon Ambulance is called the Are You OK? The Are You OK program. In the almost 14 months now that I've been sheriff, we've had 7 saves. And these are folks who, some of them even have Life Alert. One woman who had Life Alert, when she fell down in her home, she was unable to reach the Life Alert button, and she had landed on her other wrist. One wrist was broken. The way the Are You OK program works, for those of you who don't know, is you designate the time that you want a phone call. It could be Monday through Friday. You may only want it Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And it's between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. And we call at the allotted time, and you simply, it's an automated call. You press 1 if you're okay, 2 if you need help. If we call you and you don't answer at the allotted time that you picked, let's say you pick 8:30 every day, we ask that you have a backup person. Could be a grandson, granddaughter, neighbor. We'll call you. If you don't pick up, we're going to call your backup person. If they say that you should be there, we're going to call you back just to make sure you're okay. If you don't pick up, we're working with our local police department, who've been fabulous, especially our great Chief Brooks, and we'll dispatch help to your home, to your apartment, to your condominium. And again, in 14 months, we've had 7 saves. One of the most serious ones was a woman who had gotten into the tub late the evening before, and she was in the tub for over 11 hours. And only for that call in the morning, we don't know what would have happened, right? So it's a free service, and we encourage everybody to sign up for that Are You OK program. Another great program that we have, all of these are free, by the way. They're designed to keep you safe. And these are fantastic for seniors, like my mom who's 93, but they're great for everybody. I have a brother who's on a lot of different medications and has some allergies. This is a great program called File for Life. It's got a neat little magnet on the back. Our first responders are trained to look for this as soon as they come into your house. So this goes on your refrigerator. And in the Files for Life has everything in there. Your contact person, next to kin, your primary care physician, any medications and dosage, any allergies, any recent surgeries. This can be a real lifesaver, the Files for Life. Just like that, working with the TRIAD, the Yellow Dot program, this is also a great program. Basically, think of the Files for Life in your glove box. So now, if you're in a motor vehicle accident and you're incapacitated and can't speak for yourself, first responders know by looking at the rear window that there's a yellow dot. It alerts them to look in the glove box. It has your picture, so they know if you're a passenger or you were the driver of that vehicle, and they can render the appropriate medical care because they know, again, what your allergies are, what medicines you're on, if there's any physical ailments that they should know about. So these programs are key to help keeping you safe. We encourage everybody to contact us at the Norfolk County Sheriff's Department and find out more about these programs. One other neat program that I just wanted to introduce while I had you, this is just a deck of playing cards, and it says Mass Most Wanted on it. We have an anonymous tip line, and I'll leave one of these here because for our seniors, you may want to play with these cards. You never know who you might see, but we've given them out to police departments, and we've given them out to our inmates at the House of Corrections. And I'll tell you why we did that. So right now up at Dedham, at the Norfolk County House of Correction, we have close to 450 men at that facility. The females were housed up at MCI Framingham, which is not the nicest place. So we recently moved our females out. We have a contract with Suffolk County Sheriff Steve Tompkins. So our females are now over in Suffolk for a little while until we can retrofit one of our buildings for them. But for the men, when they have recreation time, they play cards. And they usually have to pay for a deck of cards. We're giving these cards out free because on those cards are missing persons, unsolved crimes, unsolved murders, most wanted individuals that we're trying to track down. And we introduced these, and already we've got some tips that may be actionable with the district attorney's office. The day we introduced this, one of the people on that deck of cards, a gentleman from Weymouth who was wanted, turned up in Florida, and much to our chagrin, a week later, we found out there was a gentleman who looked a little different, had cut his hair a little differently. He was in our housing unit 2B, and he was on the deck of cards, and we had him in custody for a series of different crimes. So this most wanted deck of cards came to my attention back when I was working for United States Senator Scott Brown. And a dad came in to see me. His son dropped out of Boston College, and he said, look, my son is no saint. You know, he's gotten into smoking pot, and he's trying to find himself and find his way in life. He was bartending at a bar down in New Orleans and was stabbed for his tip money, and he bled out and died. There were so many unsolved murders in Baton Rouge and New Orleans, down in Louisiana, that the corrections system introduced these deck playing cards to help get some information. Since then, it took off to Florida, South Carolina, Rhode Island, and we introduced it at the Norfolk County Sheriff's Office. So we're hoping that that bears more fruit, and we can work with our great DA, Mike Morrissey, and try to solve some more of these crimes. But everything we're doing up there, you know, in conjunction with TRIAD and our great partners here trying to keep you safe, we encourage you to find out more about us. Joe, the number is 781-751-1635. But you can just visit us on the web at the Norfolk County Sheriff's Office. And please encourage your neighbors and friends to sign up for these free programs like Are You OK? You know, it's really peace of mind for the people who love you. It's a great program for you, but if you've got family that live out of state and they can't check on you every day, just having that knowledge that somebody's calling you at least once a day to make sure you're okay, it really eases everybody's burden. So thanks very much. I'm going to stick around and take any questions. Thank you so much. Did you want any questions now? Yeah, Joe is going to play Phil Donahue and go around with the microphone. Does anyone remember Phil Donahue? I mentioned that to my teenage daughters the other day, and of course they didn't know who Phil Donahue. They know who Oprah Winfrey is, but they didn't know who Phil Donahue was.
Anyone have any questions? Want to ask the sheriff? Who let me out?
All right.
Sheriff, do you want to talk about some of the other programs you offer to the inmates?
Oh, sure. So most of the folks that we have at the House of Correction, sadly, they're with what we call dual diagnosis. A lot of them are young. I'd say early 20s, 21, 22, 23-year-old guys. Some of them look like they could be my nephews, and they come in and they're really banged up. They're addicted to drugs and alcohol. 80% of them have a dual diagnosis, so they have some mental illness, whether it be anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, runs the whole gamut. And basically, at some point in their life, they either stop taking the medication they're prescribed, or their mental health needs were never met. And so at an early age, probably by junior high, they started to turn to drugs and alcohol. We call it self-medicating. And then they were pretty much a wreck by high school. So by the time they go through the court systems and they come into our care and custody, we've got broken people. And they've committed some stupid, stupid crimes. They're going to do the time for their crime. We're not saying we're soft on crime, but we treat the whole person. So when someone comes into us through intake, they'll meet with our mental health folks. They'll also talk with somebody in classification, and we really try to find out what their backstory is. How did they get here in the first place? And the overwhelming majority of these young men, they have mental health issues, and they weren't addressed. But one thing they knew for sure was when they got high or they got drunk, all those problems in their head seemed to float away. And then they'd wake up and the problems would still be there, so they'd be depressed, and because they were depressed, they'd go get high again, and the cycle went on and on. And once they get an addiction like that, they're out there driving under the influence, cracking up cars. If it's a drug addiction, like something like heroin or painkillers, they've broken the trust with their family. They've stolen family jewelry to pay for their addiction. It's just a vicious cycle, and it's really tough, you know, to try to mend those family bonds, which is so important for people getting clean and sober and not relapsing. So we work really hard on family reunification. A lot of the programs we have for the men up at the House of Correction deal with their addiction issues. There's classes for NA and AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. We have anger management. Oftentimes these guys are up there and they're crying and they say, in my right mind, I never would have hit my girlfriend. I never would have hit my wife. And we deal with it head on about, you don't raise a hand to a woman that, we don't tolerate that. We have those anger management classes, and we're working actively now with Dove. Domestic Violence Ended, and we're going to have Dove come up and enhance our curriculum so that we house the abusers, and we feel that it's our job. It's called the House of Corrections for a reason. It's our job to straighten them out and make them better people when they leave our care and custody, so they don't go back and do the things that landed them there in the first place. We do an awful lot for the men in our care and custody, but oftentimes on a Saturday, I'll see moms and girlfriends coming up the hill, and they see that prison with barbed wire. It's kind of intimidating, and they've got a little toddler, a little kid in tow, and that child's pretty scared. They don't know why their father is in prison. They really don't know the whole story. So we're trying to reach out to those people and see if we can't help them. Working with Dove, we've put some pamphlets in the lobby, because that may be the one opportunity for that person to realize she does not have to tolerate this behavior from her partner. And we have that in multiple languages so that they can get the help that they so desperately need. Now, all the good things that we're doing are for the people who want our help. Sadly, there are people who have not broken their addiction, and they'll stop at nothing to continue to get the drugs. So you're hearing about this first, but this is probably going out on the newswire now. Working with the Dedham Police on Saturday, we arrested a woman in our lobby who was trafficking. She was bringing the contraband into her boyfriend. Now, if you can imagine, when you're incarcerated, whether it's at the county or state level, when you pick up the phone to make a call out, it says, if you're an attorney, you can call a different number. If you're calling in, we have a separate line for attorneys, for attorney-client privilege. But otherwise, it says this call is being recorded. So they know this. And sometimes they'll try to talk in code, and they'll say, hey, Joe, did you talk to Sally? Do you have that package? Yeah, if you could get that package, yeah, okay, They think they're very crafty, but we have two great people in internal affairs, and we're listening to the calls, and we're deciphering who's trying to sneak drugs in and who's trying to get drugs by us. So just this Saturday morning, this woman was coming in with Suboxone. And it's one thing if it's medically prescribed, but if it's not medically prescribed, you can't have it. And she was trying to come in. We worked with Dedham PD and we arrested her, and District Attorney Morrissey, I believe she's being arraigned in court today. We haven't found out who brought these other drugs in. This also happened over the weekend. Somebody came into our lobby, went into the first set of bathrooms, and they taped some drugs underneath the toilet. And what they're hoping then is some of our offenders who are in the cleanup crew, the cleaning program, the guys that are lower level, and they're 30 to 60 days, they're going to be getting out pretty soon. They're over in a building called the Dedham Alternative Center. The cleaning crew would then go in to clean the bathrooms, retrieve the drugs, and then maybe work with another inmate in the kitchen. And when they roll around the trays of food during lunch, we'll say, then they're the couriers, they're the runners. So our corrections officers have to be on their toes 24/7. We also have 5 great canine officers up there. And the canines pretty much pick up all the drugs, the contraband that are coming in. But lately, the new drugs, some of them are synthetic, and the dog's nose hasn't picked it up yet. So we're working on that too. Sadly, we had 2 inmates over the weekend. You may have seen this on Boston 25 News. We had 2 inmates that after their lunch, they were in their cells and they were laying down, and our corrections officers were making their appointed rounds, and noticed one of the guys was just kind of almost lifeless or limp. His arm was hanging out of the bed, and the corrections officer went over to see, was he going to respond to his commands? He was non-responsive and lethargic. He looked over in the next bunk, similar. So there were 4 gentlemen in this one bunk, in this one cell. 2 of them, non-responsive and lethargic. called the code immediately, had medical personnel down there, they responded, administered the medical help necessary. Then they were transported by hospital to the nearest medical facility, which is right here in Needham. It used to be called the Glover. It's Beth Israel Deaconess now. And they're going to be okay. But it was pretty scary there for a while because they had ingested drugs that somebody smuggled into the jail. So here we are, all these programs trying to keep the inmates clean and sober. We're doing everything we can to give them the programming they need. And I'll say the lion's share of them are good, and they're trying to get clean and sober, and they want to live a more productive life, and they want to make amends with their family and their loved ones and all the people they broke trust with. But it only takes a couple of bad apples. So it only takes 2 or 3 inmates to continue to talk to people that try to get the drugs in to the jail, and then that can poison the whole housing unit. So it's a 24/7 operation. I'm on call 24/7. We had kind of a crazy weekend this past weekend where Saturday I got a call that outside our Quincy office there was a body laying on the sidewalk. Quincy police responded. It was just up the street by this, there was a restaurant bar, and I think this was a homeless person who may have died from hypothermia. We don't know the exact cause of death yet. And then we had the arrest we made of the woman trying to smuggle drugs in. And then we had 2 overdoses, which we had to deal with. And on top of that, my sheriff's deputies responded, what we consider like a SWAT team. It's the SRT, but you probably more commonly know it as SWAT. Just over the Weymouth line in Hingham, so it's Plymouth County. We belong to a partnership called Metro-LEC. So you have law enforcement from all over responding. We had folks from Millis and Stoughton, and I believe Norwood was there, Plymouth County Sheriff, Norfolk County Sheriff, State Police, Boston Police, and we had a gentleman who I'm told took himself off his psych meds and had talked or contemplated about suicide by cop. So he was shooting at our law enforcement officials, hoping they would shoot him back and kill him, is what he was trying to do. That's what I'm told. The investigation is still ongoing, but I was down there just to see how our guys were doing. We have 3, usually 4 officers that respond to that, and just want to make sure they were safe. But it all ended peacefully, and the suspect who was barricaded in did surrender himself to law enforcement. Just on that note, this ties in what we do and all the drugs that we're aware of. We know we have a massive opioid problem, and that's kind of fueling the crime that's related to the drug addiction, and it's certainly who's coming through our court system into our houses of correction. It's because of the opioids. We have a couple of officers that are embedded with the DEA, the FBI, and the U.S. Marshals. There's a joint task force, and they're out there actually watching the traffickers, and in some instances they'll go make buys. And what they're finding is, and you can Google this, there's so many cartels in Mexico, and they're now making vats. Imagine just a big 55-gallon drum of crystal meth. They're giving it to the Dominican cartels that have all the distribution routes, mainly out of Lawrence, Mass. So the Mexican mafia gives it to the Dominicans are going out and giving away crystal meth for free to get kids hooked. And then they have a built-in customer base. So this is what law enforcement is up to all the time. And when they're up on those wires, listening to the drug deals being made, they're also stopping human trafficking because they hear a lot of other intelligence while they're up on those wires. So we do a lot more than just the care, custody, and control. We're out there in the community working with our partners in law enforcement, trying to keep the drugs out of here. We also do a lot with the schools. We'll have deputy sheriffs go out to middle schools and high schools, and we'll talk with the kids about making the right life choices. And sometimes grandparents and parents and teachers can talk to her blue in the face, and it's kind of like familiarity breeds contempt, and the kids don't want to listen. So what we do is we bring out a baby-faced inmate, and there's sadly plenty of them. So we'll bring out somebody who's 20 years old, who looks like he just sat in that high school chair, and we'll have that inmate do questions and answers with the students. Recently we were in Norwood, where it's Zavarian Brothers High School, and right over the Westwood line. And we sat there, and that place was packed, and you could hear a pin drop. And this inmate, his name was Elijah, he said to them all, you know, how many of you guys like to play video games? Like Fortnite, Mortal Kombat. Oh, every hand went up. All the kids like to play video games. How many of you like ice cream and pizza and Doritos? And you like this music and you like these movies? You get none of that in prison. None of it. And he said, I'm 26 years old. And he looks about 19. I've got 2 children by 2 different women. I don't have a job. What kind of a man am I? What have I done with my life at 26 years old? And Elijah's backstory, his dad had him smoke a joint when he was 9 years old. He grew up in Dorchester. Mom and dad split. He saw his dad actively dealing drugs. He got shipped to live with an aunt in Mississippi. His cousins beat him up, so he went to live with an uncle in Florida. That didn't work out. Back to the streets of Boston. He was in Dorchester. Then he came to Norfolk County, and he was committing crime around the Randolph area, and he landed with us. By the time we were done with him, he was a model inmate, and he was going to work for the Painters Union. So I believe he's transformed. Now, time will tell. You know, we know that is a very stubborn number. The recidivism rate is high. It is high right across the country because of the drugs and alcohol. The grip of addiction is so strong that we had a guy last March. It was like 3 days before St. Patrick's Day. He was due to get out anyway. He was about to be released within 72 hours. He was on an ankle bracelet. He was on our work crew. All he had to do was abide by the rules. But all of a sudden, that little demon in his mind started talking. He wanted to use. He cut off his bracelet and he ran. But we found him alive, but we didn't know if we were going to find him alive or dead. But he's a heroin addict, and he relapsed. You know, it is so tough to fix broken people. That's why we go out to the schools and we try to get the kids to stay on the right course in the first place, because every inmate did the same thing. Raided mom and dad's liquor cabinet, smoked some pot, grandmom or granddad or mom or dad had surgery or went to the dentist, so there were painkillers, Vicodin or Percocet or Oxycontin. They got a taste for that, and never did they ever imagine, because they all hate needles, they never think they'd stick a needle in their arm. And it's the same old story over and over. When you talk to the folks that are incarcerated, it's almost like the same story. So whatever you can do, I would encourage you to talk to the young people in your life. I know that our school resource officers try so hard, our teachers and coaches, parents and grandparents. But I know what it's like. I've got 2 teenage daughters. And you know, we're battling a vaping epidemic now, where kids are vaping THC. So they're not smoking marijuana and setting off the smoke alarms. They've got more of like a vapor mist. But what they're inhaling it through, very crude, cheap products, a lot of them imported from China. And there's these oils that you have to use to basically break down what you want to inhale so that you can vape it. And it's those added ingredients that are causing these lung diseases. And I believe we've had 6 fatalities just from vaping in Massachusetts. So a lot of what we do is outward facing. We come out to the senior centers, we go out to the schools. We run a leadership program down in Braintree every summer, and it's a week. And we get kids signed up, and we really build up their self-esteem and their self-confidence, and we role play so they know how to deal with peer pressure. But at the end of the week, we do a little pizza party for them, and they get a certificate, and they love it, and their moms and dads love the part of the curriculum that's on anti-bullying. Because bullying in our day, there was always schoolyard bullies, but at some point it ended when you could go home when the school bell rang. Now, with these cell phones, it's 24/7. The bullying doesn't end. And we've actually seen kids take their own lives. So again, talk to the young people in your life. We're all invested in this together. Yes, sir?
How young do some of these kids start?
Some of these kids start, sadly, even before 6th grade. So we're talking kids in 4th and 5th grade getting, you know, and I don't know if it's peer pressure or dare. You know, maybe they, you know, kids, they're like sponges. Everything mom and dad say, like if you say something, some curse word when you're driving in traffic, you know your kid has got to repeat that, right? So if they see mom and dad are drinking a lot, and you know, they might take a taste of it. Or if they see the mom and dad are smoking pot, right? Now Massachusetts has legalized marijuana. I didn't vote for that. I think it's a gateway drug. But kids now are saying, well, it's legal, yeah, but you're still under 21, so it's just like drinking and you're not 21 yet. But we've kind of relaxed our attitudes so much so that across Massachusetts, teachers are now complaining about the high school students being stoned. So, you know, I've got 2 daughters, and they're going to be going off to college soon, and it's $55,000 to $65,000 a year. And I certainly don't want to pay that kind of money, you know, and no parent does, to have their kid acting like that. But the people behind the marijuana industry, if you look to see where they want to open up the pot shops, I'll just give you 2 examples. Boston College and Boston University. Right on BC, as you get towards the Brookline line, Cleveland Circle is the area. There used to be a Cleveland Circle movie theater and an infamous bar room known as Mary Ann's, where all the BC kids went. That's where they want to open up a retail pot shop. It's right on the Green Line. They have a built-in customer base. The other end of Comm Ave, down near, I think it's called Audubon Circle, by St. Mary's Street, the St. Mary's Street on the Green Line, it's all BU students, and that's where they want to open up the other pot shop. Again, Brookline Line, on the way into Fenway Park. They know who they're targeting. And what do they do out in Colorado? Even the great Peyton Manning, Tom Brady from the New England Patriots, his big rival Peyton Manning, he invested in pizza shops out there, right? And the joke was, of course he invested in junk food and fast food, because everybody in Colorado was going to be stoned and have the munchies, right? So hey, he's a capitalist, he did that. The reality is our kids are inundated with temptation, right? They put incredible pressure on themselves for academics. There's got the cyberbullying with the phones. The pressures on kids have never been greater. And on top of all that, they have the same old mental illness struggles that we all did growing up, whether you have anxiety or depression. And then you add in the abundance and the availability of drugs to help them escape all those pressures. So we have a huge job ahead of us. Yes, sir.
Did you ever think of going in a different direction? I've been giving blood for 62 years. I'm in the Hall of Fame out in California.
Thank you.
Over 38 gallons. Did you ever think of going to the schools? In fact, I did a video. I gave it to the cable. We haven't put it on yet. My theory was, if you could go into the schools and tell them about starting to give blood, because they can give at 16 with parents' consent, it might be something that once they do it, they'll never get off it. I look 10, 20 years down the road with all these people that are on the drugs, we're not going to have enough blood to go around anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I just gave blood Saturday, and it's still the same thing. As soon as you go in, they need you.
That's true. That's a great idea. And if they knew that their blood was going to be screened, that might be a motivation to not do that temptation, because there is a reward. There's a good feeling doing such a good deed, and thank you for your donations. And that might be the impetus. That might be all you need. It's like kind of that carrot and stick approach. It might be the reward that these kids are looking for to give blood. And let's face it, one thing I've learned about millennials and even younger than the millennials is they live in a social media world that many of us didn't have to put up with. They don't just value themselves, they look for affirmation from strangers. How many people liked my post? So they're constantly putting things on Instagram and Facebook, and I don't think they use Twitter too much. There's something TikTok and Snapchat. I try to keep up with it, but all these things they do, it's how many people liked me or liked what I posted today. And that's how they feel good about themselves. It's like a temporary high, and then it crashes. And so they're looking for somebody to give them that pat on the back, that attaboy, that girl, you're doing a good job. So again, it's so important for parents to be there and to let your kids know that you love them, that you care about them, that you think the sun rises and sets on them. It might sound old-fashioned, but if parents aren't there doing the job, they're going to look for affirmation somewhere else. All right, anybody else? Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I know a friend of mine that
What is this, Joe?
Oh,
okay.
okay. Gotta talk loud.
All right. A friend of mine
somebody had a family, not his family, but somebody that had a family with troubles with drugs and drinking. And he took the person to get help. And the person was an alcoholic. When it happened, he wasn't drinking. He was just on drugs. They would not take him because he didn't have two disabilities. And I thought that was terrible. So
Yes.
he said to the person, do I go up the street and buy some beer and make him drink it? Would he get in? They said no. He got right away. And I thought that was terrible. Here they were going for help for the drugs. He was trying to help his family out, and he couldn't help them.
There's a facility like that on the Cape, and I'm familiar with that, and I won't name the one, but I think.
That's where it was.
Yeah, I know the one. I had a friend who actually bought his brother booze so that he was drunk when they got him there.
This guy didn't know enough.
It's crazy, yeah. No, so here's the other part about when people are ready, there's that window of opportunity when somebody is, we think hitting their rock bottom and they're crying out for help and they say, okay, I'm ready, I want it. You gotta find a bed. And it is so hard to find a program and beds to get people clean and sober when they're ready. I'll tell you one thing, law enforcement, for our police and fire and corrections officers, they have tremendous stress on the job, and the PTSD that our corrections officers face, there was a study out of UMass Lowell, it's likened to a veteran who's seen combat, the PTSD, because imagine being locked up. Your job for the next 20, 25, 30 years is to be in jail. You're in jail with people, some of them very bad actors, Latin Kings, MS-13, and they say terrible things, and they spit at you, and they'll hit you, and if they can make a shank and stab you, you're under constant stress in that atmosphere, year after year after year, okay? We need to get more beds available for law enforcement folks, because the rates of suicide for corrections officers, their mortality rate is 10 years younger than any other profession. Alcoholism, divorce rates. So again, for fire, police, corrections officers, there's a facility, I believe it's been permitted in Canton, Mass. So next town over, Canton, they're gonna build a facility, and one whole floor is gonna be dedicated beds for law enforcement, first responders who are ready to get help. Because again, they're only human. There's only so much stress they can tolerate. And what do? They'll turn to alcohol and drugs to help alleviate that stress, that anxiety, the PTSD that goes with it. But to your point, ma'am, when somebody's ready and you have that window of opportunity to get them help, it's so critical to have availability. I will credit the governor. Governor Charlie Baker has made the opioid crisis a signature issue. He's put his money where his mouth is, and there's going to be a lot more beds coming available across the Commonwealth. I don't know how many new ones will be in Norfolk County, but if you ever had a loved one or a neighbor or you know somebody who did, it is mind-boggling when they finally want to get help and you can't get them a bed. And what happens is this: family members aren't equipped to deal with that person, and they're out of control. So unless you do something called Section 35 and force them into a facility, they're out in the streets, and they're a nuisance to our local police until something's done. And I will tell you, jail's right for a lot of people. Certainly MS-13 and the Latin Kings and drug dealers and people who do breaking and entering and all that. But oftentimes the people we see should be in a mental health facility. And that's what we've become. I think it goes back to Governor Michael Dukakis' days when, rightfully so, there were a lot of abuses at some state mental health hospitals. And there was then a push to say, let's mainstream people, let's get people back out to the community. Well, the reason they were in those facilities in the first place is because their loved ones weren't equipped to deal with them. So now we mainstreamed everybody, we put them back out. And we've been doing that over the decades. So now if you go to Worcester or Quincy or Boston and you see people living in doorways and under the bridges, the overpasses, they're not in their right mind. Who would want to sleep out in the streets in this freezing cold weather of New England and self-medicate with booze and drugs? These people need to be in a state-run mental health hospital. And as we stand here today in 2020, I think we need to revisit it, and we can do a better job there's better safeguards. I know there were some horrendous stories about abuses at the old Bedfield State Hospital. But those were, certainly, those were the bad old days. We can put safeguards in place now and do it right. And you wouldn't see so many homeless people wandering around the streets. I know when I go to the Star Market down here by CVS in Norwood, it's gotten a lot better thanks to local policing, but you have to look with some compassion. You see these people wandering around like zombies on drugs and alcohol. They didn't really choose this life. A lot of it is mental illness. And if we could get them processed and into the right kind of facility, because yes, a lot of people have committed crimes and they deserve to go to jail, but jails are not necessarily the right place to be putting people whose main crime is that they were born with mental health issues. So I think collectively we have to do a better job with that. All right, well listen, I've talked enough. I know we have a whole bunch of folks up here who have a lot more to say, so sorry for taking up so much time, but I thank you for the opportunity. Thanks very much. Thank you, Jerry.
Oh, I have a question. When we come out here, we come out from the city, Boston, to come here.
Yes.
Lots of times when we have to slow down or stop at a light or something, people come to our car and ask us for money. And I never know if we should give it to them or not. I feel sorry for them because they look homeless, but on the other hand, they could be buying drugs and alcohol, so you don't know which way to go.
I do too. I feel bad for them too, and so I'm really torn. This is a tough question. The question is, when you see somebody at a stoplight and they're begging for money, my Catholic guilt kicks in, and I am guilty of rolling down the window and saying, because Jesus always says, when I was, homeless, did you shelter me? When I was sick, did you visit me? Whatever you do for the least of my brothers, you do unto me. So I sometimes give them the money, but sometimes I get strong and I say, no, I'm not going to give them the money because they're going to go buy drugs or alcohol. But I'm torn like you. I would put the sergeant on the spot. I would say our police department would probably say to you, for your own safety, protect yourself first and not to do that.
If you do, I prefer probably giving food or water. That way, in your mind, they're getting nourishment. Getting instead of money.
Okay, that makes sense.
And we all give, I know we give in many different ways to our local charities. I bundle up my old clothes that don't fit and I bring them to St. Francis House downtown and they distribute them. But it is tough. It is tough to pass them by because they look so desperate. All right, thanks very much.